You're listening to No Filter with Zack Peter, your go-to source for all the latest pop culture and reality TV tea, served fresh all week long. Now, let's dive in. All right, guys, welcome on in. I have a very special guest that I think you guys are going to be really excited for because not only have you, I know you've been following me and Donna and I collab a lot, but there are a bunch of other creators that are like the internet. We're internet lawyers, we're internet attorneys now, we're detectives, we're the judge, the jury, we're everything when it comes to covering these legal scandals. And the biggest one right now that we've been talking about is Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni. And so through the internet, I've been connected with the one and only Dave Neal, host of Rush Hour with Dave Neal. And so I figured today, why don't we bring on Dave Neal so that we can dissect this together. It's a meeting of the minds. Please welcome to No Filter, Dave Neal. Hi.
Yeah, it's good to be in your sandbox here. That's all podcasting is an adult sandbox.
That's really what it is. And it's funny, we taped your show as well, and we were just talking about how, it's crazy that we're taken so seriously at the moment about, people, I've been doing press here in New York to talk about Blake and Baldoni, and it's just funny that, we're experts in this case now.
You cover pop culture, and when a cultural moment happens, you jump on it, and because this is what you do, and when it rains, it pours, and right now it is a monsoon of content.
So before we dive into it, because I wanted to chat with you about this new Hollywood Reporter article that came out this week, but how did you get caught up in all the Blake and Baldoni fan? Were you just the biggest Gossip Girl fan, and you're like, oh my God, Blake Lively, let me dive into this lawsuit?
I actually had a sort of negative viewpoint of Gossip Girl because I did background on it back in the day. I did background on that show and Jane the Virgin. In fact, my wife and I both did background and stand-in work on Gossip Girl before we even met each other. So we have some weird connections. And I tell you what, Blake Lively looked miserable back in the day. And I've always tried to give her grace and always try to say, you know what, maybe she's just trying to memorize her lines. But, here we all are shivering, doing some spring dance scene in January in New York City, wearing next to nothing outside. They literally have heaters to kind of melt all the snow. And then there she is in her plush fur complaining about, her day when we're getting paid, $112 for 8 hours work. So, not a huge fan of Gossip Girl. They had a bad rate, the CW rate. They pay you less, even in the union, than other shows. So, yeah. So not a fan, but I mean, it was culturally speaking. I mean, in New York, I remember days that cast was treated like the Beatles. They really were. You'd see Ed Westwick running from one location to another with a bunch of girls chasing after him. It was a wild time to be alive.
So wait, do you have any details on the Penn Badgley and Armie Hammer of it all? Because we're hearing now that Blake Lively, there was an old interview in, I think it was Glamour magazine in the UK, where she talks about poisoning the cast against Penn Badgley because she didn't like him when he was first brought onto the set. And then we've also heard these resurfaced stories from Armie Hammer where he claims he only ended up taping 4 episodes of Gossip Girl, and he had to have his arc cut short because he got fired from Gossip Girl for calling out Blake's behavior.
Yeah, it all makes sense. I don't have any personal insight, but that Armie Hammer story makes so much sense because they're like late teens, early 20s. They're running the show. The entitlement, it's like the whole dopamine aspect of it. You do a hit show, you're just happy for the work. Season 1, season 2. By season 3, you're under usually a 5-year or 6-year or sometimes 7-year contract, and you have to almost turn down better opportunities to stick out that show. That's why you always see people that seem to despise the show that made them famous. I kind of feel like Blake wanted to do bigger things and probably thought she was above that. I mean, once you do these shows, you memorize a couple lines. It's not rocket science. They're not out there doing Philip Seymour Hoffman level acting. It's very, very cookie cutter. Yeah. So I feel like they were probably just miserable by the time the thing ended.
Yeah. What is your take on the legal drama now between Blake and Baldoni? So when it first dropped, or did you even hear about the rumblings on set of It Ends With Us while they were doing the promotional tour?
Yeah, so my arc is this. I started covering Bachelor content over a decade ago, and then my channel took off about 4 years ago and became full-time Bachelor Nation News. And then I created a podcast called The Bachelor Rush Hour. I knew I wanted to get out of that niche, even though I was getting giant views. I was making 3 videos a day. It
Yeah.
was crazy. And I've just seen the writing on the wall that the show's kind of sort of started to lose a lot of traction with a lot of other dating shows coming up. So I took Bachelor off the title, kept it as the Rush Hour podcast, and started covering other entertainment news. Scandival,
Yeah.
uh, you know, um, Kennedy, his domestic violence issue, like stuff like that. You cover what's just off of the show, the parallel stories from these TV shows. And Bravo is just a great source of all of that
Yeah.
because they really do make good shows. So I was aware of the unfollowing and the cast and the rumors, but it was really, as we discussed on my show, it was really the Christmas Eve New York Times articles that I remember telling my wife, God damn, $250 million lawsuit. Like we're getting big money in. And then Justin Baldoni's, response, his fall from grace, and then his response. And just like most people, you start to read you go, how could he respond to all of these different accusations? And one by one, there was a response to all of them. There was a lot of conflating of situations or exaggerations. And you go, well, when people tell the truth, they don't need to exaggerate what that truth was.
Yeah.
The biggest one that got me was when Blake claimed they were showing her pornography.
Mm.
That to me required that was so egregious that in her amended complaint, and as we know, it wasn't pornography, it was a water birth. I just had a baby 9 months ago.
Yeah.
We watched 100 different water birth videos. It's a scene about delivering a baby. They showed her a water birth and wanted to elicit that sort of emotion. I mean, it was perfectly reasonable to show that, right? And for her to call that pornography, to me, crossed the line of credibility. And you
Right.
go, well, what are we trying to do here? This is now a smear campaign.
So how do you deal with everybody? Because like if I go online and I look at the things people are saying about me, they're like, "Oh, you hate women. You're probably some crazy MAGA extremist that doesn't believe women." I'm like, it's to me, it's not about. I love women. I was raised by single incredibly strong women, and to me, I'm the biggest champion of women. I mean, in my own head, somebody could make an argument otherwise, but like I feel like I wanted to believe Blake, but I just saw so many red flags with the New York Times article, and two, with her initial complaint that to me lacked a lot of context behind some of the allegations. And then people are just like, they think it's anti-feminist or anti-women. How do you, as a straight man, feel about that argument that they're making for essentially, kind of saying, hey, I don't know if I fully believe her.
Well, raised in the single mom club,
Yeah.
my audience is 90+% women.
Yeah.
Every Christmas, we do a single mom's Christmas wish list and try to help out. I absolutely, I see how culture war issues have divided people. And I'll start by saying this, right? This Me Too idea of believe women. I agree with the idea of believing women.
Mhm.
And yet I think scams exist when people don't want to speak up against something or go against something. Like, Black Lives Matter is a good movement. Is someone going to take advantage of that? The PPP loans were good, but they got people scammed the
Right.
hell out of those. So people took the Believe Women movement, and then some people started saying believe all women, and they turned it into an all women thing
Yeah.
as a way to say, but what about X, Y, and Z? And you go, yeah, of course. Like the Duke lacrosse case from a while back was a woman who lied about rape, and in the end, I mean, the prosecutor got fired and there was $1 million settlements. Rolling Stones was wrong. It was a giant story. In most cases, people tell the truth.
Right.
In the cases where they don't, there's usually a $1 million athlete involved because athletes are suckers. They have professional athletes they get exposed to fame and fortune like that, and all of a sudden they're banging people and bad things happen.
Yeah.
So you see the stories where this happens. Now, I covered in the Bachelor world 2 years ago the story where a woman took advantage of the Bachelor and faked a pregnancy. I was threatened with a $120 million lawsuit. I was sued for harassment. She called the FBI on me and all these other things.
Mhm.
In the end, I was right and I was able to prove medical fraud. But it was a case where I had to prosecute my point very in a very precise way, so that I don't look like a woman hater. Because
Mm-hmm.
in the end, holding people accountable helps women in the long term be believed. You just
Yes.
have to hold the fraudsters accountable. We don't know if Blake Lively's a fraudster. She just hasn't really lived up to the threshold yet where people are going to believe her. She might bring evidence that changes people's mind.
I think she shot her credibility one too many times right now. That she's really struggling to win me over. And I had said I think Amber Heard really hurt the Me Too movement, and I feel like if Blake Lively goes down, it's going to put the final nail in that coffin. And the unfortunate part is it then hinders, and this is why I'm so passionate about it, is it then hinders other women being able to come forward with legit cases, especially women in Hollywood being able to speak out against like a Harvey Weinstein or somebody that is really powerful in Hollywood, that is taking like a Rose McGowan, right? And I think what happened, and this is why it was so telling of me in the initial New York Times article with Blake Lively, it felt too much like they were trying to copy the playbook with Rose McGowan and Harvey Weinstein. And they were trying to keep it too similar so that it would become the next big scandal without doing the journalistic due diligence of verifying the claims that I think this makes the New York Times look bad. I'm like, I posted something the other day and I'm like, it's really embarrassing that right now people are taking me more seriously than Megan Twohey. Like, that's fucking sad that like she's shot her credibility in all of this by running this story that just didn't have its due diligence. We're finding out that they reached out to Baldoni late in the night before the article even came out. They didn't give him a lot of time to respond. They omitted text messages that had really strong context. They claimed that they reviewed thousands of documents, but then it's like, well, if they did, then why did they run with this narrative? You know what I mean? And so that to
Yeah.
me, it's like when we start bending the rules, we then make the game unfair, and then you lose the audience because they no longer trust you.
And this is the problem with corporate media, is that content creators have a duty to their audience. I was talking to the host of Under the Desk News, and the idea like, well, content creators don't have a editorial department or a department there to fact check them. They have the audience. And in the end, like I've made my bones by being truthful and authentic. And if I get something wrong, I'll tell people, but trying really hard to get it right. And Megan Twohey might not have that accountability because she doesn't live or die by the Patreon subscriber or the YouTube subscriber. They're getting their bills paid by someone who's like, get me an article,
Yeah.
sell it. And the truth, is whatever your opinion, you can kind of
Yeah.
like pull the truth in one direction or the other. So yeah, I understand the framework that has led and by the way, there's plenty of TikTokers that will exaggerate or even inflame, and I think they get called out for that. And in the long run, they kind of have a lower batting average than somebody who tries to be as credible. Like I've tried to look at like in plays devil's advocate with how Blake could be on the right side of this story, or how talking to psychologists, and I get reamed for this, but trying to go, what could be wrong in her head that might make her feel like she's not the villain? Could it be a postpartum anxiety? And you might say, well, she was like this before. Well, yeah, maybe she was like this before, but maybe having 4 kids and the pressure to live up to Ryan Reynolds and Taylor Swift made her kind of fly a little too close to the sun. It doesn't mean I'm making an excuse for her. I just like to understand what got us into this situation.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's one thing that I love about your content is you analyze it from different angles and you're willing to, like myself, play devil's advocate and just look at the other side of the coin, right? Like, let's explore what the other side may be thinking. Let's explore how they're approaching this because I think it just gives us so much more context in the situation. And then in some cases, when you look at that other side of the coin, you then find that the claim on the other side is a lot stronger because then the understanding doesn't hold the weight that maybe you thought that it would in your head. And I think, back to the Megan Twohey point, she has the New York Times that's going to protect her, and she has their legal department that's going to protect her. You and I have the audience that's going to hold us accountable, and they will hold us accountable in those comments, right? And they will, absolutely make sure that what we're putting out there, they'll fact check us, they'll call us out, they'll give us more context into things, they'll dig up, videos from years ago, and and I think there's a level of accountability that I'm grateful that I have because of them. And also I feel like with the audience that I have, they've given me their trust, right? And I take that seriously. And they trust me, even if they don't always agree with me. They trust that what I'm giving them is something that's very honest and authentic for me and my viewpoint on things.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to speak to the devil's advocacy, it's like we got all the time in the world. We
Yeah.
can make these videos as long as possible, and it's not to drain the clock. It's like, all right, let's flip over a bunch of stones and see what we can find. And with Megan Toohey, to practice what I preach, if you look at her, something happens in the brain when you feel like you got the big story.
Hmm.
And she might have looked at some of those text messages, and she might have read them in a way where she thought she had the smoking gun and they were going to sink this guy, and he really was the monster. I mean, she could have believed, because we have that issue. I know I've been this way in the past, where you get a hold of a story and you're licking your chops at what you have, and it can kind of be complicated because you need to kind of take a bird's eye view of that and step back, because sometimes you're too close to it to know what the truth is. And that might be a little too generous of her, but I think they thought they really had the big one here.
But then it comes down to journalistic integrity. And the
Yeah,
journalistic integrity would have had her look into the other side of it, and
sure.
they would have found that everything that he alleges in his lawsuit, they would have had that context, right? They would have found the home video. I'm sure Baldoni would have been like, "Here you go. Here's the footage. Here's the video that the pornography video. Here it
The porn
is."
claims,
You
yeah.
know, and it would have immediately shot Blake's credibility, and I don't think the story would have been run, or at least not the way that it was, because now it really does make Megan Toohey. And that's the thing, is I was just listening to Las Culturistas with Matt Rogers and Bowen Yang, and they were just like, "This is she's an award-winning journalist. She's from the New York Times. You think she's gonna lie?" And I was like, "Well, guys, if you actually got into the details of this, you would be shocked as shit as I am. That it doesn't seem like that. Like this is." The case that we think it is at face value with the headlines. And I also have an issue with, like, even the way that the media took her amended complaint, Blake Lively's, and then the story then became about these two other women that accused Baldoni of being uncomfortable. And that was the headline, almost as if I predicted that it was a press release that was put out to them, maybe by Vision PR, maybe by Leslie Sloan, I don't know. But the way that the story was covered by all of the different media outlets, and they all had, and I screenshotted all of them and I posted on Instagram, and I even showed that the night before, I was texting with my friend Donna, and we were like, "What do you think the story is going to be tomorrow?" And I said, the story is going to be two women come out and accuse Baldoni of harassment. And then I included a screenshot of that text message to show Blake Lively it's very easy to screenshot a text message and provide it. And then I included screenshots of all the headlines that said that exact thing. Like, I just have become so media savvy that I know how these PR tricks work. And the New York Times article for me was a PR trick.
Yeah, you're right. It's a battle of, sort of unnamed sources that, both camps unwilling to maybe say something out loud, but will like dribble a source. And what it might come down to in this trial is, I know they can't reveal sources, or you shouldn't at least, but it could come down to like, what were the initial negative stories written about Blake Lively, and can they be traced organically versus not? And I think they will be traced organically. And maybe Blake Lively just has a hard time realizing she could be so unlikable. And, I've analyzed the humor aspect of this. I do think Blake thinks she's funny.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the nuance between humor and being an asshole is extremely, I mean, it's a tight needle to thread. And maybe you and I pull it off perfectly, but there is nuance to it. And Ryan Reynolds much better at it than Blake Lively. I mean, they might crack each other up privately, but publicly, like, she doesn't build that goodwill when she ribs an interviewer, and then she just comes off and looks like an asshole. But
Yeah.
you can see that there is maybe an itch to be funny. But the mean girl energy is what happens when you don't land the punchline.
Yep, I agree. So hold up, wait a minute. I want to cut in here very quickly. I know we're all riveted by this conversation, but I just needed to give some love to this week's sponsors. We got two of them. That's Rocket Money and BuyArray. Rocket Money, listen, I've been bragging about it, right? It's the start of a new year. And I told you that my top priority this year is to focus on my financial wellness. Well, thanks to Rocket Money, my goals feel achievable because they show me all of my subscriptions right in one place and help me easily cancel the ones that I've forgotten that I've been paying for. We've done that a number of times, right? We watch a new show, we sign up for this new subscription, and the next thing you know it, we forget about it and we're still paying. Rocket Money pulls together all of my spending across all my different accounts so that I can clearly track my spending habits and see where I can cut back. Missing out on a show that everyone is talking about isn't an option for me. I'm constantly signing up for all these different streaming services, and now I have an option to keep track of them with Rocket Money, which has been a game changer for me. They'll find all your unwanted subscriptions and even help you cancel them so that you never have to worry about them slipping through the cracks ever again. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. See all your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money is going. For ones that you don't even want anymore, Rocket Money can even help you cancel them. Rocket Money has helped over 5 million users and saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/nofilter today. That's Rocket Money, ROCKET, rocketmoney.com/no-filter. I also want to give some love to my pals at BioRay. You know I love me some BioRay. I got my primary detox right here while I'm traveling to make sure that I'm staying healthy. And then I'm off. Obviously, I'm in New York, so I'm going to be imbibing a bit. So I want to make sure that my liver is strong and healthy. So I have some Liver Lover, a revitalizing liver tonic. All of their tonics are not only delicious, but they're put in these liquid tinctures that are perfect and easy to take. You can drip them into your coffee, your tea, your water. Sometimes I put them in a little Prosecco to kind of have a nice little healthy boost, or to at least not feel so guilty. But BioRay products are the plant medicine that you've been looking for, and they have products for the whole family: infants, kids, teens, adults. They even have an intimate line that you can check out. So if you want to give BioRay a try and boost your family's health this new year, then definitely head on over to bioray.com. That's BIORAY, bioray.com, and use code ZACK, ZACK, for free shipping. That's code ZACK, ZACK, at bioray.com. Head on over, lock in those savings, and get up on it. All right, guys, back to the show. So, and speaking of the media manipulation and the PR tactics, there was another article that came out of the New York Times, and like you, I am willing to cover both sides of it. And so this, to me, from my impression of this Hollywood Reporter article, looks like a plan from Baldoni's team. And it looks like a PR spin from his side. And obviously, I feel like Blake has been doing the same thing. But so there was the Hollywood Reporter published this article, and it says, Justin Baldoni's leap of faith. What role did the controversial directors, is it, how do you, Baha'i? How do you pronounce?
Baha'i.
Baha'i. Okay. Controversial director's Baha'i religion play on set of It Ends With Us. Could everything that went wrong with the movie actually have been one big cultural misunderstanding? And so the article then dives into his religion and the history of his relationship with certain people like Steve Sorowitz. And there's even, I guess there was a rumor that I had not heard until now that Colleen Hoover may have been also part of this religion, and that may have been their fabric of connection before she gave him the rights to It Ends With Us. But so the article, basically, to summarize, it talks about his religion and about how, I guess, the way that they connect with people, or the level of intimacy that they have, and openness and candor that they have, sometimes doesn't always play well when you're on a Hollywood set, because, or in a more corporate or professional environment, because you may be very open and emotional, but you can't expect the other people on the receiving end of that to be comfortable with that. And so the argument in this article is basically like, it could have been his faith that made him so open, that made other people uncomfortable, but it could have just been a cultural misunderstanding and a clash of these two cultures that don't fully align.
Yeah, I could see that. But when you think about it, like, they're not accountants. They're not, they're when you go on a film set, people are hugging each other and
Yeah.
talking to each other like family. So there was actually video footage that emerged of, like, I think the last day of filming, where Blake and Justin hug each other when they see each other. So this idea that Blake had, where she was like, "You guys don't have to hug him," it's like, I don't think he's hugging in any pervy way. I mean,
Yeah.
hug everybody. Obviously, you want to set your own boundaries, but I don't think there's anything in the Baha'i faith that would lead to, like, an excuse for crossing the line.
Right.
And certainly not the way, I mean, but if anything, that leaked voice note, everyone was like, "Oh, he sounds so creepy." That was the thought from the Baldoni haters. And it's like, it sounds to me like a guy who's whispering because he doesn't want to wake his kids. It's
Yeah.
like, you're gonna get whatever you think is happening. You're gonna hear a creepy guy if you
Right.
want to, but I didn't catch that at all.
Oh my God, it turned me on. I was like, talk to me more, Justin. Um, and I mean, and also, again, the context of that voice note, right? Like, people are like, why did he send it to her at 2 a.m? That's not appropriate. And you're like, oh, well, he was responding to her 1 a.m. text message. And, it's just the context of these things. Or I even had a video go viral where I read the text message of her and the ball busting and the never with teeth, which, I mean, can be read two ways. Some people are like, she was just talking about her character. And I was like, well, but she was talking about, like, her personal love language. And, it, but the argument that Blake makes with some of these claims, or the arguments that she makes with some of these claims, could very easily be made with her own behavior, right? Whereas the text message that she sent could have been totally platonic, or you could have read into it and seen the sexual innuendos and been like, oh, well, is she implying, is this a blowjob that she's referencing when she says no teeth? Or is it just, she means she's not like a snake with fangs? Like, it could be played both ways. And that's my point was, with her allegations, they can also be played both ways, of super innocuous, or they could have been super creepy, similar to the voice note, right? You can play it both ways, but the context of it is what ultimately matters. And I feel like most people don't lean into that enough.
And you know what? You did see a lot of some media call not share the context of a late night voice note. And it's like I said, these aren't bankers sending each other late. I work till 3 a.m. most nights, and it's like a voice note, you leave it for them for when they get it.
Yeah.
And then you also actually hear him talking to Rainn Wilson in the same sultry voice. I mean,
Right.
it's a little cheesy, but you
Yeah.
see it happen in other situations, and you go, well, so far we just know that this is how he talks. And what's interesting about Justin Baldoni is we don't really know him. He's not a celebrity,
Right.
or hasn't been in the past. So a lot of people didn't know much about him. They didn't know anything about Steve Sarowitz. I did
Yeah.
a 30-minute video on Steve Sarowitz today with his Baha'i faith. He was raised Jewish, married a Catholic woman, studied Catholicism, was going to raise the kids Jewish, and then all of a sudden got into the Baha'i faith, which is kind of like a mega faith that sees all other religions as right. So there's no need to fight over whose God is right. The Baha'i faith basically was one of the more recent churches or more recent religions that came out, where people said each leader, a Jesus, a Muhammad, they were there divinely sent to share a message, and they are all chapters in a larger religion. It's actually quite beautiful, and I can kind of understand why a lot of Hollywood folk are getting into that religion, because it takes away the warring my side versus your side.
Yeah.
And what's so tragic is you watch Steve Sarowitz, and maybe this, he was accused of saying he's gonna destroy her like Israel's destroying Hamas,
yeah.
right? And that to me reads very much like character assassination.
Yeah.
But also, the worst crime, if he did say that, would be like, dude, chill out.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't say it to Blake. We've all been in scenarios where you're like, I'm gonna end that motherfucker,
Yeah.
and it's like, you're not telling them that, you're just venting.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear from that source the context, because Steve Sarowitz, the billionaire, became a billionaire when his tech company took off.
Yeah.
And he wants to put money into films that reflect his Baha'i faith. So I have a hard time believing that they would at the same time have a double standard, like a toxic work environment.
Right. And when you dive into Baldoni's past and his beliefs, and you dive into Sorowitz and his beliefs, like, it doesn't align with the characterization that's being presented in Blake Lively's lawsuits. But it was so interesting that you referenced the Israel and Hamas thing, because to me, and it seems abundantly clear that this is what Blake Lively's team continues to try to do. And that's just like with the uncomfortable headlines, right? That was the big term that everybody was using, that he made other people on set feel uncomfortable. And in that case, I think that the unnamed source, right? Because it was really an anonymous source. She has a lot of these anonymous sources, which it's not illegal to have an anonymous source, but it's like, but what is the purpose of putting that in this lawsuit? How does it help her legally? It really doesn't, unless you have proof that he did make this statement and it was part of the retaliation. But to me, it was more of the media manipulation to run with that narrative, to align her with being somebody that's, that comparing herself to Hamas and saying that, he's trying to, take her down the way Israel did to Hamas. Like, to me, it was just such a strange miscategorization to put her in alignment with that social cause.
And it's such a divisive topic,
Right.
that a lot of people have said, and this might be a little too tinfoil hat, but people have said, well, this is a topic that could put a fissure in a lot of these pro Baldoni subreddits because it's complicated, And I don't think that's going to happen. I really like what the moderators are doing with the It Ends With Lawsuits subreddit. They are very much allowing conversations to be pro Justin or pro Blake. And I think the tough thing with astroturfing and with subreddits is that initial upvotes or downvotes could inform the opinion of future people. So I could post something that's dead on that might have 70 downvotes because I'm in the audience that doesn't want to hear it.
Right.
And so, like, you do kind of get echo chambers, but I really think so far people are doing a pretty good job being respectful and understanding, like, no one wants to be on the wrong side of this story.
Right.
And I'll be okay if some crazy, news comes out that I go, well, she might be rude in interviews, but she was right about this. This guy's an asshole. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't feel the need to apologize because I'm just covering it as I go.
Yeah.
But, with the Depp versus Heard, I mean, I got put on a list that one guy got swatted, and like people die from swattings. Like people can get murdered. It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
CPS was called on somebody else. I've alerted my local sheriffs that, I'm covering these. I actually got pulled over by the cops for speeding. I live in this neighborhood right around a speed trap. They got me on the way to a stand-up gig. And I told the cop, I was like, you give me the ticket. I don't care. But let your department know I make YouTube videos out of this house. If you guys get calls like this happens, because I had the FBI called on me. It only takes one crazy person to do something.
Yeah.
And you just need to let people know, like, this is the world we live in. You got to be careful out there. And I don't want to be put on a list. But if I am, I want to be able to look at my track record and say, I stand by what I said. You can conflate anything, but you can also watch my content. I stand by it.
Yep. And I think that's what makes you and I so similar in that sense. Like, we will stand by what we say, but we're also open to be proven wrong, and then we'll pivot from there. We'll take, accountability and be like, all right, I saw it very differently then, and with this new information, with this context, whatever, it's shifted my perspective, and I've, evolved since what I saw before, but there was also new information that was introduced that we didn't have before. I'm waiting for Blake's smoking gun.
I'm a Bernie bro. If I can find a way to dunk on a billionaire, are you kidding me? Tax this motherfucker. Audit this guy. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't like billionaires. I'm for the people. I'm for the people, and I love to talk entertainment news because on my podcast, the last like 10 minutes I give political stuff, and it triggers a lot of people because when you cover entertainment news or Bachelor, you're going to get people across the spectrum, but in the end, you get a lot of new audience, and I'm really against audience capture and trying to just give them what they want.
Right.
And if anyone subscribes to my channel, you're subscribing to authenticity, and it might not be an opinion you agree with, but at least it's not, astroturfed or bought and paid for.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, like, I remember I've had people that have been on my team or that have tried to rep me or try to give me advice on, like, don't talk about this topic or don't talk about that topic. And I'm just like, when you come on to work with me, you're signing up for No Filter with Zack Peter. So you better fucking believe that you're gonna get No Filter with Zack Peter, whether you like it or you not or not. Like, I'm never gonna pander to the audience. I'm never gonna tell you what you want to hear, because I feel like the audience can be, or that audience that gets pandered to and that likes being pandered to, it's a fickle audience, and they will turn on you and stop. You'll lose everything if you stop pandering to them. And so rather than pander it to them, I'm going to be me. I'm going to be authentic, and the people that want to be here and want to stay here will continue to show up and will continue to stay. And I think, I don't know how you feel, but like for me, when I see people say, hey, I listened to this episode, I may not have fully agreed with you on everything, but I, one, respect you, and two, appreciate that you were able to show me a different side of things, or show me an alternate, perspective, or whatever it is, right? Whether it's about housewives or a cultural event, it's just, I appreciate that the audience has that level of respect, which tells me, okay, we've built an intelligent community here that I'm very proud of.
It's so funny. I was going on a walk with my wife, and we bought our first home this year, and really had our baby because we could afford to, because YouTube's been good to us. All the things that we weren't really thinking of doing until things, abundance came in our life a few years ago. And someone was calling me out for like not being as good as Candace Owens. And I was just thinking like, dang, Candace Owens is somebody that probably has such high brand recognition, whether you love her or hate her,
Right.
that the fact that this person's even telling me I'm not as good as her was like, I actually talked about this, how like, I know my career's taken off because I got called a failed comedian. It's like, wow, how fortunate to be in this conversation, like
Yeah,
that's all that matters.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and like, listen, everyone's hooked on this case, and they trust us to lead this case moving forward, or to cover it, and it's been fun.
Yeah, I told my audience I was at around 80,000 YouTube subs, and I said, if you get me to 100,000 subs, I'll fly to New York and live cover the entire case,
Oh,
knowing it probably won't go to trial. And then they immediately got me to 100,000. I was like, all right, well, let's do it. So next March 2026, I'll be there next to the hot dog stand. Kind of.
we we're doing this. We're getting uh uh we're gonna do a New York penthouse that's gonna be a content creator hub, and we're gonna
That's
cover
right.
this case, Dave.
Yeah, it's a tax write-off. I'm gonna have my Starlink strapped to my.
Oh,
To be quite honest, I'm probably gonna hire like a proper cameraman that can go live, because I've done that. I've covered court cases in the past. I rented a van for one in Arizona and kind of went live that way. But it's kind of tough in New York. You have to kind of like, I might have to be like, those street performers have the little like laundry cart with their battery and their, I might have to like have my
yeah,
mobile set up ready to go. But it'll be interesting. Like my thought is, on if it does go to trial, I'll probably make content from like the local content house, and then try to get there for the end of the day,
yeah,
for the coming and going, and
yeah.
when lawyers are doing interviews and stuff like that.
What's going to be interesting too is this isn't going to be a televised broadcast of the trial, because it's federal case in New York. So it's not going to be like Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, where cameras will be in the courtroom. So the only live coverage people will get is anyone that's there reporting live from outside the courthouse.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes they'll let somebody like be inside tweeting. I remember
Yeah.
that there was that one account that was
Inner
tweeting
city
from the
press.
inside.
Inner
Yeah,
city
and it's
press
like,
is always in there.
yeah, there's gonna be people taking bathroom breaks, sending notes through the window. I mean, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I'm no expert, but I did hear that there might be a way in which it is televised. But I agree with you. I don't think it will be. I mean, that depth stuff was insane. I mean, I mean, it was, and you know what? I mean, people got to watch the whole thing. They got to watch it play out, and I learned more watching that trial than I ever did in school learning
Yeah.
about the system. So it just goes to show that everyone does have their day in court. If this thing does settle, I think she's going to have to pay him money, a lot of it, because I don't think he benefits from settling for any other reason than an apology, and
Yeah.
I don't see her doing that.
No. And yeah, I honestly don't know where this goes from here, because I don't know how far her level of delusion is and how much she's going to fight to protect her ego. I mean, or Ryan Reynolds too. I mean, he's somebody that I don't think his career will take a hit as a result of this. He has Disney and Marvel in his court. His fans aren't following. Like, our audience is women, right? They're not the ones that are going. They're not the the Marvel nerds that are going and watching Deadpool, and those people are like, they don't care about this. They care about Marvel Universe and the different movies and the connections and the Easter eggs, rather than they care about this trial. and they're gonna stay loyal to him.
I've gotten some shit for that, being like, I don't think this affects their career nearly as much as his. It's like throwing a lawn chair off the deck of a cruise ship for him. I
Yeah,
mean, sure, there are a lot of people following this, but yeah, he's a cash machine. I mean, he's not going to do superhero movies forever, but if he needs funding to go make a movie, I mean, the guy's got a really good career. I followed him
yeah,
since Van Wilder. Like, the guy's been around forever. And to be honest, Blake Lively, my advice for her, which stands, is find a way to admit to maybe absorbing Justin Baldoni in the wrong way and not understanding that him doing his job, triggers anxiety, my own issues. Go that route.
yeah,
Take a year off. Go spend time with your family. Come back and do some art house movie and hit it out of the park.
yeah.
She's and this is where some people disagree. I think she's uniquely beautiful, and I think she can hold her own as an actress. So go do something different, dive into that character, and just
Listen,
hide out for a bit.
if she stays with Ryan Reynolds, I think she will be fine. Because I mean, he can finance a movie and he'll cast her. Like if she can't get cast by any other Hollywood, production, he will definitely make sure he gives her a vanity project to keep her, getting that acting itch out.
And you know what could get ugly too is when you talk about would she stay with Ryan, is does anyone get thrown under the bus? We saw her publicist kind of explaining away the missing emoji and
Yeah,
how it didn't come out in the software. So in this lawsuit against the New York Times, who's at fault? Who did Blake Lively get misled by the missing emojis? Was she made to believe that the
yeah,
astroturfing actually did happen, and then she got caught in a hot war? She already pulled the trigger. Like, have these conversations, and
yeah.
and this is how it could spill out when these other avenues kind of dry up.
I agree. Dave Neal, thank you for coming on No Filter. Thanks for chatting with me. Guys, go subscribe. You've already hit your 100,000. I'm almost at 100. So
Oh, nice. Yeah. It came quick. Yeah. Twice a day, morning and afternoon, podcast, entertainment news, and then YouTube videos in between. So we're cranking it.
are you on the Tickety Talk too?
I am. I just followed you. I'm trying. I might hire somebody to help me because the social media, I'm just like nonstop.
I
But I'm
get it.
trying. I'm trying. But yeah, social media is my Instagram is where I post all my stand-up show dates, and it's Dneals, Dnealz.
Well, when you're in LA, we'll need to, or when we're in the same city, we'll need to collab again in person.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Take care.
Bye.